Mercedes heads into the season-opening Bahrain Grand Prix amid doubts about its performance level after struggling with rear-end instability during testing. The problems appear to have been caused by aerodynamic regulation changes to the floor, with some suggesting it might be connected to a phenomenon called tyre squirt. In recent years, two clear design philosophies in Formula 1 have stood out. The Mercedes low-rake concept is a more level car with less of an upward slope to the floor from front to back, while Red Bull favours a high-rake design where the rear ride height is higher. But why might this have caused problems for low-rake Mercedes? With input from the race's expert, former Jordan and Stewart technical director Gary Anderson, that's what we're going to explain. Do subscribe so you don't miss anything from the race, and chime the notifications bell so you know the millisecond there's something new to watch. Rake is the difference between the front and rear ride height. The bigger the difference, the higher the rake, and therefore the bigger the total volume beneath the car's floor. That creates more potential for downforce generation, albeit with an increase in the centre of gravity. It also has an impact on the rear suspension geometry, as you can see from the difference in the height of the upper wishbones on the Mercedes and the Red Bull. To run high rake successfully, you need to make sure that whatever airflow structures you have acting as a skirt to seal the underfloor are robust enough. In the late 1970s and the start of the 80s, when the ground effect revolution started by Lotus transformed F1, cars ran ground scraping bodywork that literally sealed the underfloor. Physical skirts were subsequently banned, meaning this effect must now be achieved invisibly by the airflow. The aim is to ensure the low pressure in the underfloor doesn't pull in too much airflow from the outside. Effectively, you want to keep them separate, which is what is meant by sealing the underfloor. It's essential that these invisible airflow skirts don't break down with the slightest sidewind or turbulence. If that can't be guaranteed, the extra downforce it might produce can be very inconsistent. Usually, this can be more difficult to achieve with a high-rake car. F1 cars today tend to understeer in low and medium speed corners. The high-rake philosophy means the front wing is a little bit closer to the ground in these types of corner, which can reduce this understeer thanks to ground effect. High rake also increases the diffuser volume ratio relative to the ground clearance of the front end. This means the whole car is working as a diffuser that allows the airflow to expand after being constricted under the leading edge of the underfloor, augmenting the downforce created by the rear diffuser itself. Assuming the underfloor is properly sealed, the airflow under the flat floor area with the high rake will have to travel faster to get from the front to the rear of the car to fill up that larger volume. In the case of Red Bull relative to Mercedes, that could be an increase of around 25% in terms of volume under the car. As the airflow increases in speed to fill that void, it will generate more suction to pull the car down. For both low and high rake, the sides of the diffuser work in conjunction with the low pressure area behind the rear tyre. If these combine effectively, it increases the total volume of the low pressure area behind the car. And as a side benefit, it can improve the efficiency of the overall car by filling up some of that void behind the rear tyres. When it comes to managing the all-important low pressure area under the car, the tyre squirt comes into play. Shown here in green, it can have a major effect on the consistency of the diffuser. The tyre squirt is airflow generated by the tyre turning onto the track surface. This is then displaced around the inside and outside of the tyre contact patch, and it tries to go back into the low pressure void behind the contact patch. As well as ensuring the tyre squirt doesn't interfere with the sealing of the underfloor, using it to help the performance of the outer extremities of the diffuser is also critical to diffuser performance. If the tyre squirt is not controlled, it would just be sucked under the floor, reducing the effectiveness of the diffuser and costing you downforce. At the rear, this tyre squirt tends to get pulled more inside the tyre than outside, and the teams use the strakes on the top of the floor just in front of the rear tyre and the turning vanes on the inner surface of the brake ducts to minimise the effect this has on the diffuser's undersurface. The strakes on top of the floor will set up vortices to help realign that tyre squirt and keep it as close as possible to the sides of the tyre. The turning vanes on the sides of the brake ducts will pull those vortices upward, which also helps to seal that area of the diffuser. At the front of the car, the tyre squirt gets pulled more evenly to the inside and outside of the tyre, As you come further away from the front tyre, it then starts to get pulled in under the leading edge of the underfloor. This is why it's important to separate the back of the front tyre and the leading edge of the side pod as much as possible. The front of the cars have a vertical stiffness that is at least 3 times greater than at the rear. This is to cope with braking forces of around 5G. By comparison, acceleration forces are around 1G. So with the same aerodynamic load and distribution, Red Bull can run the rear of its car with a softer vertical stiffness. This will allow the car a bit more movement and improve traction off the slower corners and reduce tyre temperatures. It can also induce more understeer in slow corners, but the lower front wing counteracts that. With more movement in the high-rake cars, you need to manage the underfloor and front wing aero map much more closely. No matter which philosophy you decide to use, managing how the centre of pressure moves around the car at different speeds is critical to its overall performance. The centre of pressure is where the sum total of the downforce acts on the car, and therefore has a significant impact on balance as it moves around. This year, the floor area, diffuser strakes and turning vanes on the lower part of the rear brake duct are reduced. There were suggestions before the season that the high-rake cars might struggle more because of the new regulations. This was on the basis that it's more difficult to seal the underfloor of high-rake cars. But the Mercedes problem suggests perhaps the opposite might be true. Gary Anderson's possible explanation for this is that with effectively a 25% larger diffuser volume on the high-rake car, it doesn't really matter where the airflow is coming from. It will increase in speed more than the low-rake cars to simply fill that low-pressure volume. Provided the tyre squirt is well managed and the underfloor sealed, this will make up for any downforce losses from the reduction in the area of the floor. Everyone is suffering from more airflow being sucked under the floor of the car, but it seems the harder you are working the diffuser, the better it can handle this leakage. If Mercedes is finding it difficult to control the tyre squirt and seal the floor, there's more to solving it than just raising the rear ride height, because it impacts the angle of every aerodynamic surface on the car. But Mercedes will already have taken a close look at possible solutions. The biggest problem if you just convert to a high-rake design would be the front wing sensitivity. In the CFD model and wind tunnel model, the relationship to the ground is fairly steady state, but on track that gap is opening and closing constantly. This can induce an aerodynamic stall just when you don't want it. Front wing sensitivity needs to be signed off on track, as some drivers, for example Max Verstappen, show they can handle it and others less so. We will find out in Bahrain this weekend whether Mercedes really does have a problem or if it's already solved it, and perhaps a little more about the role the floor changes and tyre squirt has played in its difficulties. Let us know in the comments how you expect Mercedes to do this season, and don't forget to like and subscribe.